rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday, April 10th, 2023. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. We're going to start tonight with a public hearing pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 76, Section 12B, Subsection D. The Attleboro School Committee is convening a public hearing on the matter of school choice for the 2023-2024 school year. We will immediately follow with the regular school committee meeting after the adjournment of the public hearing. So I'll open the floor for the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on the matter of school choice for the 2023-2024 school year? All right, I don't see anyone, but as is our practice, we'll keep the public hearing open for, let's say, 5 minutes. And, yeah. All right, so we'll keep the public hearing open until 6:20, and if we don't have anyone to speak by then, we will get on with our meeting. What's that? It's Chrissy's fault. She was late.
But they were.
Smart ground?
I hope so.
We have student advisory council then, budget to start.
I'll make sure that he'll
What's that?
not hold us up.
Bring them in and we'll get started. Thank you.
I got both screens working now, so we've realigned.
All right, so I am going to call an end to the public hearing, as there's no one here to address the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the public hearing. We'll immediately reconvene in public, our normal meeting.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. All right. We are now in our regularly scheduled meeting. The reminder from earlier that we're being electronically recorded remains in place. And the first item on our agenda is our Student Advisory Council report. Are you ready, Mr. Medeiros? I know we're early, so.
Ian's supposed to come,
All
so
right.
can we wait?
Yeah, we'll move things around. Absolutely. All right. We'll start with Superintendent's report, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple brief updates for the committee before we get to tonight's major business, the budget presentation. First, as I mentioned at a previous meeting, it's been made clear to me that there are members of our community who are concerned about the surveys that their children are being asked to take when they're in school with us. And as I promised when I last brought this up, I agree that we should be able to explain all the choices that we make, and taking a look at surveys and being able to explain what they are and what, why they're being used, and give parents a chance to review them and make decisions where there's a choice to be made should be part of the process, and that I don't object to any of that. So I have my first opportunity to test the theory that we mean to deliver on that promise. So there is a survey. It's given annually. I forget exactly how many years now, but it's been going back a while at this point. It's called the VOCAL survey. It's an acronym, VOCAL. It stands for Views of Climate and Learning. It is administered by the state. It is given in conjunction with MCAS. It is administered at the end of math MCAS in grades 4 and 10, and science MCAS in grades 5 and 8. The goal is to collect information about engagement, safety, and the environment, student data as to their feelings about those topics. We looked at the survey. We believe that parents will find nothing controversial in the questions, unlike some of the other surveys that brought this issue to the forefront previously, but it is available for review. Parents can go on the DESE website and look for the VOCAL survey, and they can look for themselves. The other thing I would tell parents is that this survey is entirely voluntary. Students may choose to take it or choose to opt out of it. That's always been the case. Most kids do take it, but wanted to make clear to families that it is an optional survey and participation is voluntary. So if you have a student in grades 4, 5, 8, or 10, again, 4 and 10 would be math, 5 and 8 would be science. They will be asked to take that survey by the state, and again, students have the choice to either take it or not. So just wanted to provide that update to the community. Okay, moving on. Again, recently we talked about cell phones in the high school. I said that there was a larger issue of a district need for some conversations about how to handle cell phones in our schools. We did clarify that we are not blocking reception of cell phones here at Attleboro High School, that that's a result of the design of the building itself and new construction. But we do understand that there are still families who have concerns around cell phones and student access to cell reception in the school, which is why I really believe strongly that this needs to be something that's considered as a policy matter. As I outlined before, we have a process internally to sort of get our heads straight in terms of what we think the recommendation should be, but ultimately, I do believe it's the committee's decision to speak for the community as to what the school department should be expected to deliver on this. I just wanted to give you an update that the next step in that process is this week. I've scheduled a meeting with all of the assistant principals in the district to talk about their views. They're on the front line in terms of discipline. So when students' use of cell phones in classrooms become a disciplinary issue, they're the ones that have to deal with it. So I know that they have some pretty strong feelings about what might be good ideas or bad ideas on how to handle it. I think there's a pretty wide appreciation among the administration that this is a problem that needs attention. But sometimes our best intentions can lead to worse outcomes, which is why I know the assistants are a particular group that want to make sure that they get a chance to share their perspective on what's really happening in classrooms and what they're dealing with from a disciplinary perspective. At that point, I think I'll be ready to come visit the subcommittee, policy subcommittee. I'm hoping the May meeting, I don't know what the agenda is, so we'll work out whether that's a good time or not, but I'll be ready by that time to come in and talk about my perspective based on the conversations I've been having internally. After that, based on how that discussion goes, we'll outline a process, but of course, as I talked about before, we need to include families, staff, students. We need to get everyone's perspective on this issue before we get too far ahead of ourselves. But again, I think the place for that process to unfold is in policy subcommittee. So I just wanted to give that update and hope to be there soon.
So you're thinking May for the policy subcommittee meeting?
If there's not a conflict, that would be my choice.
I think we can, not to speak for Mr. Storrs, but my suggestion would be that we can make it work.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, so I will get myself on the agenda and we'll start the conversation there. Again, the outcome here is to have policy in place that we would then need to revise the handbooks to include into the handbooks next March for a September of '24 implementation. So we're really trying to take a slow, deliberate course on this. Don't need to rush. Want to do it right. Want to make sure everybody gets a chance to participate in the process. But I really believe strongly that because of I don't think we're going to all see eye to eye on what needs to happen. So without policy to support whatever we're doing, it'll be hard to implement. So I think that's very important. My final one is board related, so I think we should switch back to the Student Advisory Council.
Great. All right, so we're going to take a break from the superintendent's report and pivot back. Student Advisory Council update, Mr. Medeiros, Mr. Miller. What do you got for us tonight?
All right, so we have a presentation that has a couple of parts. The first part is we're just going to briefly show you the infographic we've been talking about that we've been making with the other students in their student advisory councils around the region that we've been working with, and we just had our last in-person meeting last week with them, so we finalized our project, and now every project is getting sent together into one report. So if you want to. So we made kind of a brochure using information we gathered and photos from the various districts we worked with. So there's a lot of our pictures in North Attleboro's pictures in here, along with some other districts.
Yeah, so we really just focused on ways to make school spirit a more inclusive thing, because obviously, like we've talked about before, we bring a much different aspect to it where we have so many kids that it's hard to include everyone. So that was kind of the big angle that we brought to the table for everyone. And then you can see on our the second part, we still have a lot of ideas and how to solve this issue. Basically, that's what we came up with as a group, and how to just promote everything and make everything more of an inclusive event.
Yeah, so, and then this brochure went along with a whole written report of all of our findings and ideas. So those are all getting sent out. And then the next part of our slideshow, we've been kind of talking to students, our friends, students of different grades, just students around the school, because, it's our job to report on their feelings. So we've got a kind of a list of a couple of things that are have been going well this year, and then a couple of things that maybe need to see work with the rest of this year, possibly next year.
Yeah, so starting with the outside the classroom work environment. So as I'm sure you guys have all seen, the school, a lot of those they're like what we call collaborative spaces outside. Those are great spaces where we can really just get into like organized groups and just bounce ideas off each other. And it's really just a good way to brainstorm. It's a great way to study. I know for a lot of my classes, we use those to study, especially because we can just get into our own little study groups and ask each other questions. We can help each other. It's a really good way to change up the learning environment and still be super productive with it.
Yeah, another thing that's been new this year, teachers and classes have been trying to have some mental health breaks during their class time, especially with the change from, I think it was 60 or 65-minute classes to 85-minute classes now. They're a bit longer, so students enjoy a break either in the middle or towards the end of their class, just to break things up. And these activities range wildly depending on the teacher and what the class engages with, but sometimes it's nice. Some students really enjoy just turning off their brain from the learning for just a couple of minutes and regain their thoughts, and then be able to go right back into it instead of getting bogged down the whole time.
Yeah, and then for therapy dogs, we have so many students, and a lot of students are enduring a bunch of different things, and it's just really nice to be able to have a different way of support and a different way to relax. And it's also just a really nice way to see the administration is really trying to make a way more comfortable environment, see school as a really positive thing and get people maybe school isn't so bad, people are actually looking forward to stuff, and it just makes the day an overall more a better day basically.
Yeah, and a lot of things like the therapy dogs, maybe that doesn't help every student, but there are students that it does help, and we think that's important. Not everything works for everybody, but the more people you can help, the better. And then school events that we've been hosting throughout the year have also gone really well. The spirit rallies went great. All of our sporting events, as we tried to work on, have seen more participation through the spectators and stuff. The concerts have been going very well. The mini golf fundraiser I heard was fun the other day. So just all these different events that have been happening in the school, and not even just during school, but also after school. Students are really getting involved with them, and I think they're pulling more students than they have in the past, and people that wouldn't have gone to those events in the past either.
Yeah, definitely. And then microwaves is just it was just a nice way to show. We had microwaves in the old school. Then new school we had no microwaves, and it was a nice thing because it showed that administration was listening to the students' voices, because a lot of people were like, "Oh, we want microwaves," and it was a reasonable thing to ask for, I think, and took some time, but the student body voice was heard, and that was just a really nice thing to see.
Yeah, and even just a little thing like that, you wouldn't think, oh, we put in microwaves would have such a big impact, but I know a lot of people are happy that they're finally back.
Yeah.
Because that changed a lot. So the next part, just a couple of big issues to mention, and so I know one of them is seniors in their class rank. That's a huge topic within our system. I know a couple of years ago there was a change to how that all worked. So I've heard comments from seniors, not even just this year, but in the past couple of years on both sides. I know a lot of students want to know their exact class rank, because we don't get to know that. We're ranked only by decile, and then that's the information that gets sent to colleges and scholarships and all that. So I know a lot of students are interested in knowing their actual rank, even if they know oh, top 10% might sound better, or it might sound worse than what they are thinking they place themselves at. So there might be discussion there.
I know that was a big change before, and then that also goes into how we do balance out here, but it's just a discussion point. Like, a lot of people talk about it, and they're always like, oh, I'd love to know where I am. Like, it doesn't, like, I talk to students that are probably at the top of the class, and they're like, yeah, I'd love to, like, really know my spot, know where my achievements brought me, even if it's not number 1 or 2 or whatever. And I've known students that are maybe not even in the top 10%, and they're like, well, maybe a decile sounds better on paper, but, like, I'd still like to know, it's an interesting number to know, even, and, like, I don't see many students thinking of it in a negative light. Regardless, everyone, like, would not want to know, and on any side of the spectrum would think it would be a positive thing. But that's just something to think about there.
And then probably one of the most popular, well, unpopular, I guess, things that most students were saying was the schedule, and especially for AP classes, because the thing is we were so used to having the same class every day. We're going to see this teacher like 5 times a week, and it's just like it's like a lot more reinforcement. That was like a really key thing that we were seeing among students. And the schedule now, it's a lot harder to obtain some information and like really be able to like fully remember it and get it packed down in your brain, because it's just so much of like, it's an every other day thing. So it's okay, I go to this class, then I do nothing like that class for my next day, and then I go right back into it again. But it's just like there's always just a little bit of a disconnect, like a little bit of lag in between. And it just seems like a lot of students are really just like, that's been a main thing. Just it's a little hard to get as engaged in a class when you only have it every other day. And especially considering sometimes that one day is just a really long day of like notes or something. And obviously like notes are super important, but that's not necessarily going to be the best way for a student to learn. And when they only get that class every other day and one day is completely just notes, it makes it a little difficult for some students. And then just in general, just some classes, it just seems like the length of the classes gets a little, like some people like towards the end, just really the work ethic just isn't as high, and people are just a little less motivated towards the end of the class. And then it seems like sometimes in a class, sometimes that last 20 minutes is just kind of like not really doing a bunch. So just stuff to think about. The schedule was a really, really big topic among students.
Yeah, and then more on the schedule, we've discussed with some students like alternate schedules, what they want to see, and even teachers we've talked about, because some teachers enjoy the new schedule, some would like to see a change, and obviously like it's a brand new schedule, like we're gonna have to work out the kinks, but then some people like they just preferred the old one, and there's something to be said about like right now students have to juggle like 8 classes at one time. They have to catch up, they have to get down the work for 8 separate classes, and that could be a lot, because before we only had 5 classes at a time. So we've talked to some people. Some people really like the old schedule. Some people said, this schedule gives them a little more like options with it, like to fit more classes in, which is true in some cases. But then also I've talked to some students and teachers, and some people was thinking like this schedule kind of works, but what if we like dropped the trimester thing we do here, and we go to semesters, and then you take like 4 classes a semester, so you still have those long blocks like we do, except now you have them just every day, and then you're only juggling 4 classes at a time, and then halfway through the year or whatever, you switch over to the other 4, and then AP courses, some of them are designed to only be to half a year, so sometimes teachers have to stretch them out a little bit, but while others are designed to be the whole year, so you would just take them over both semesters, and then that opens up the opportunity of like students like doubling up on classes and things at a time, like taking 2 math classes in one year, 2 science classes, so then later in their schedule, they have more freedom to either take like more AP classes or more electives and more interesting things like TTEs and all that. So I think there's definitely an ask for possibly at least discussion about switching the schedule up. And then one other small thing. I heard some students complain about the semi-recent change. Now, like when we get to school and everyone parks in the back, they close the doors like right at 7:15. So if you're not there at 7:15, you have to enter through the front door. which sounds like a good idea on paper, but in practice, like some students, obviously, like we want to aim for no student like to be late. They want to be there before 7:15. But if someone's walking to the door at like 7:16 and it's closed, well, then they have to waste extra time going all the way around the school to come back in. So I heard a lot of people complaining about that, even if it was just open for a couple more minutes.
And then X block, so what we had in the old school was silent and sustained reading. And towards the end, that did kind of turn into just students just really getting like a 25-minute just time to talk, which was understandably a waste. And there was definitely a lot of room for improvement within that SSR block. So now with X block, some of the negatives that people are just picking up on is, understandably, there used to be a lot of people who would just like wander the halls basically through that class period. So now one of the key rules for X block is like you need to have an X block pass from your teacher, and they're being like much more they're not necessarily hard to obtain, but it's harder to necessarily get extra help with the teacher because that teacher may be required to teach have that be an X block teacher. So like they have to like obviously watch over the class. So that makes it just a little more difficult for being able to get extra help. Because I know just from personal experience, for Zach and I's math class, we're not able to get extra help because our math teacher, who's the only teacher in the school that teaches the class, has to like watch her X block class. So she'd have to therefore get coverage, and that'd be a whole big process for her, and then that's already extra work for her on top of everything else she has to do. So it's just kind of this is just another thing to think about where we definitely have the rules for a reason. They all definitely make sense. Just it makes it a little difficult to get extra help with some teachers, especially where that could be much needed because that extra 25 minutes could be a really big game changer in being able to understand content more.
Yeah, just like being able to get that help easier. Like, students are not like we don't even really understand. Like, because teachers have kind of told us I guess they signed up for or were assigned like roles to have an X block before the year started, and so like if they didn't sign up for a role where they could like pull kids or something, then it's they have to find coverage, and it's really hard for them to get kids, and that can hinder like our class or AP classes, even like other classes like my band class or the other arts classes where like the only time to get that help would really be X block, and then it helps students too that have a lot of sports or other obligations after school that can't always stay after, but having that option to go with that teacher was much more open in the past, I guess. And then another small thing about X block before we move on was just like in the past we had a advisory as a separate thing from the AG SSR, which now it's been combined, but before our advisory class was all people in your grade, so you're either friends or even if they weren't friends, like everyone was going through the same stuff, so your advisor could actually advise, us as seniors now, could advise us, help us through the college process, and then in previous years help us through other stuff, but now that it's a mix of all four grades, you really don't know many people in there. And you're all working on different things and are focused on different parts of your school career, so it's hard to get help from each other, let alone help from the teacher that's watching you there. Then we have one just little last part to this presentation. It's a video from the All-City concerts last week. They were awesome. I went to two of them. Performed in them, listened to everybody, like the kids are doing really well. We're loving the continuation of band in the middle schools now, and this is just a clip of the Studley kids singing the song, and I think they did a fun job. They really had fun with it. Let's see if it. No. Oh.
Okay.
Maybe it's not there. Maybe we don't have a video. I don't think we have a video. We'll get a video.
I know there were a lot of us that were there and saw the concerts last weekend. It was a great job, and great to see the band and chorus music program really in Attleboro starting to come back and putting on great shows. So It's unfortunate the videos are not there, but
Hey, if you want to see something, come to our musical this weekend, Friday, Saturday. It's a Dr. Seuss musical. Very cool.
any questions or comments? Mr. Geddes?
I just wonder if some of the feedback might be able to go to teaching and learning. I know Ms. Johnson's not here tonight, but I know the scheduling, I know this year was kind of a test run with the schedule in the new building and how all of that would work. But I think, I appreciate hearing the student perspective and feedback, so I think bringing some of that to teaching and learning might help.
Mr. Larson?
Last week, just to kind of go along with that, at the CTE advisory, some of the different CTE groups were talking about the challenge of, when the students are actually working on a project, they work on it every other day instead of continually. I don't know if you heard that in the groups you were with, but I know that was a couple different themes, so.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the report, and we always like hearing the good things, but it's good to hear from the students as to what anything could be done better, and I'm sure I know the administration's here listening and will report to the appropriate subcommittees whether or not, they agree or disagree or what we can do to do better, so thank you. All right, Mr. Sawyer, back to you and your report. Do you have anything other than budget and school choice? Any other updates?
Nope.
So why don't we do the school choice motion and then go into the budget presentation?
Sounds good.
So we had a public hearing tonight to consider whether or not we should elect not to participate in the school choice program. Just so everyone knows, the school choice law requires districts to accept school choice students unless local school committee votes not to participate. We have not participated I believe we participated 1 year, but otherwise we largely have not. Does the administration have a recommendation for the school committee on this issue?
Yes, not to participate again.
All right, so first thing I'll do then is entertain a motion to elect not to participate in school choice for the 2023-2024 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Could you give just a brief explanation of why that's the administration's recommendation for Attleboro?
Well, one, we don't really have capacity. We're full across our schools. There are, particular grade, we are a single grade in a single school that, we might have seats in, but largely we're at or above what we would call capacity. So, there really aren't seats to offer would be the most basic reason for it.
Okay. Any questions, comments, discussion, Mr. Geddes?
Thank you. I know a couple of years ago, I think the year that we kind of barely accidentally maybe voted to opt into school choice. It was with the notion that CTE programs might be able to boost their enrollment. But my understanding is even those are full at this point, and the more beneficial way to approach that extra enrollment would more be individualized contracts with other districts, but that's not even something we could accommodate now either.
Yeah, so most of our programs have waiting lists. But there, in any given year, there might be a program that is not full. I'm not sure that school choice is the best way to pursue maximizing those opportunities. Like you said, I think trying to work with districts to do individual agreements is much better because through school choice, you only get the $5,000 from the state, and that includes our CTE kids. So we'd be, basically taking them at a loss, which is why it doesn't make sense for us at the high school at all.
Thank you. And just for clarification, because the motion was worded to not opt in, a yes vote is to not opt in. So we're-
Yes. Yep.
to clarify, thank you.
Correct.
Mr. Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, every year, my stance on this is always that I always want to put Attleboro students first, and by the rules, if we do school choice, we have to treat every student equally. You can't differentiate between, that's an Attleboro student, that's a non-Attleboro student. So again, I always want to make sure that the Attleboro students have the opportunities, that the special programs, the special opportunities, all those things would be for Attleboro students, and school choice goes against that. So.
All right, so the motion's on the floor. I'm going to do a roll call vote. As Mr. Geddes mentioned, a yes vote on this is to elect not to participate in school choice. A no vote would be to participate. So we will start with Ms. Sawyer. Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Frappier?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Bordeaux?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. I'll turn it back over to the administration for the budget overview.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, before I hand over the presentation to Assistant Superintendent Regan and Mr. Furtado, that I just want to remind everybody where we are in this process, right? Our budget process starts in December, and we, move that back to accomplish some important things because before we changed the policy to do that, the budget process started after the state had released its numbers. And what we found is that because the number had been set, it became impossible to talk about our concerns around funding. It became impossible to talk about what our needs are. It became impossible to talk about priorities because those things had no place in a world where we already knew what the number was going to be. So our conversations in December are about those things, about the needs of the district, right? We've identified around $10 million worth of things that we believe we need to deliver the education that is expected of us and required by the law here in Massachusetts. And for people who say $10 million, that's a ridiculous number, I agree, it is a ridiculous number, except it's only half of what we would be getting if we were just an average district, right? So that number isn't so ridiculous when you put it in any sort of context of what a normal community in the Commonwealth is putting up to fund its education to meet these same requirements that our children are facing here in Attleboro. So, we talk about funding, we talk about those needs, and we move on now to have a conversation about budget, because now the budget picture becomes clearer. Now, as Mr. Furtado is going to talk about, there are some actual aspects of this year that make it unusual in terms of our timing, but we are in the process where we are here tonight to propose a budget, and at this point we're shifting gears away from our concerns around funding, which are real and don't go away, our concerns about our needs, and we're here to apply the priorities that we've already set with you back in December and to talk about how are we going to make progress and at the very least maintain what we're doing, given that we are underfunded and we're facing a number that at this point has largely been set for us, right? The shift in the conversation is really an important one because our concerns around funding, which I will continue to maintain are legitimate, aren't the point in this matter, because in any one given year, Attleboro's capacity to support the schools is limited by the realities of how much money the city has available to it, right? There's a finite amount, and there are important discussions about what the city's priorities should be and how much of that should go here or there. That's all fine and good, but the pie is only so big, and as we've talked about many, many times, that pie is not large enough to address those funding concerns that we talked about back in December. So we know that it's our responsibility to deliver the best possible educational experience to our students, given the fiscal realities that we face. Those realities are well documented, they're well known, and it's the job of this administration to make sure that we continue to do the good work that we do despite those challenges. And so, our focus in this moment is that we have to figure out how to best use the funds that are available to continue our good work. And I think tonight's presentation will help to outline that for you.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So with tonight's presentation, our goals are to share with you the state budget proposal, the district funding for FY24, what our educational goals and priorities are, and how we plan to maintain the teaching and learning moving forward, and our conclusion for the evening. So what are we striving to accomplish here? Once again, we'll see the Massachusetts funding proposal from, say that again?
Governor.
From the governor, our budget, and our priorities. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Furtado.
So we've got some good news here. So the state has fully implemented the Student Opportunity Act, resulting in, a nice bump in state aid for our district of about $5.5 million. The city's contribution increased by about $2.5 million. So we have about a 6.7% increase from our current funding levels to a number for next year at about $97.5 million. This will put, that $97.5 million puts us, after all the give and takes, and it's, the give and takes are even more complex this year. At or just slightly above net school spending. It's somewhere between 0 and half a point above net school spending.
So, and I'm gonna pivot a little bit from how I usually, I guess,
Sure.
handle meetings, and I'm probably gonna talk more until we're done with the presentation and then open it up, just because I want to kind of keep it focused, but, explain how that is different from past years, and then we can get to the reasons later.
Sure.
Yeah.
So for, you're talking about the net
The
number.
net school spending, right.
So, again, net school spending is up because the state put focuses on things that we have typically suffered with. Health insurance increases, special education supports, English language learner supports. The state never put mandates for those sorts of things, but never funded those mandates. So historically, schools struggled with the accelerated increase in costs in those areas. SOA was supposed to address that. It addressed it, didn't fully address it, but it did address it, and we're receiving, having been a district who historically has suffered from those areas, we're receiving some benefit for that. On the budget formula side, the city takes credits for supporting the Attleboro Public Schools administratively. They do things like our health insurance, which they basically manage, the treasurer function, et cetera, the auditing function. Those are completely legitimate expenditures that the city should get credit for. And what that does is transportation costs, which the city is also liable for, is not considered net school spending. So the way cities and towns address that need is to take these credits and fill that hole. What's made it a little more complex this year is, our train work is a bonded project. So going into that agreement, those bonding costs are being kind of netted out of our number, but are being covered by the increase in the tax base in the city, which was a recent agreement between the city and us, where we get 50% of that increase in the tax base. What's missing from that number, is the kind of historic position the city had in terms of support above net school spending, which is a function of, as this committee knows, a bunch of people leaving, and now a bunch of people working extremely hard to get command of where the dollars are.
So I guess part of the reason why I want to focus the conversation is because I understand there's a new administration and that is trying to focus in on getting this budget done. There's no budget director. However, what I was getting at is the net school spending number. And I know that there's a lot of us on this committee who spent a lot of time, a lot of political capital getting that increase over net school spending. I mean, I believe the meals tax was passed with the express proviso that $1 million was going to schools above net school spending, and that there's been a commitment, and that I don't know why, we'll get to that, but this budget that we're talking about right now at this point is net school spending, and we've as opposed to net school spending plus that we've talked about the last few years.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so is it about, specifically about this slide, or is it, okay?
Yeah, so I just, thank you. I just want to clarify where you say in that bullet, city contribution increased by 2.2 million. That's not the net school spending plus that Mr. Withers just mentioned.
Correct.
That's clarifying that the city's requirement of net school spending
From the foundation
increased from
formula.
last year.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Larson, then Mr. Demichi.
Just very briefly, we all got copies of the annual report for the city of Attleboro, and in last year's annual report, the city did receive just over $1 million in the meals tax.
Mr. Demichi.
Yeah, just a quick question, because the version of the slide that I have says that net school spending funding will be at or slightly below the foundation requirements, and this one says slightly above. So did something change between Friday and today that?
Yes, on Saturday it changed a little bit. Some of the numbers used were estimates, and some of the real numbers came in and changed it slightly.
Just as a follow-up, real numbers from the city's ability to contribute, or just in general, the entire budget?
No,
There were some estimates.
on the city side.
Okay.
All right, so, yeah, go ahead.
To clarify,
Yep.
late last week, we were given a number below what is required by law. Net school spending is required by law, yes?
There were, yes, so there were some assumptions in their development of those numbers, and as those assumptions got cleared up, it went above.
Right, but my point being, how could anybody in City Hall give a number below net school spending when that's required by law, minimum?
I don't think we've gotten a number. I don't think we've
It
received
sounded
a
like
number.
at the end of last week, there was a number that was
Yeah,
below, and
again,
it's changed since, and that's
Yeah,
fine.
I want to reiterate what the superintendent opened up with. So we're at the governor's budget, which is the first step on the state side of a very, very long process. As a matter of fact, the news came out today that the House is going to announce their budget on Wednesday. That will undoubtedly change this, and it will probably, most likely change it to our benefit. So,
I'm just surprised that a number came in that's below the required law, that's all.
well, again, that was based on some assumptions that turned out not to be good.
Ms. Frappier?
I just want to step in and give the city a little bit of grace. We are without a budget director, and estimates, even if they're not in accordance with the law, could be understandable to be a little different this time while they're working through the numbers, while the budgets are in flux. I think a little grace at this juncture is okay, whereas we get to June with numbers that are illegal, that reaction might be a little more in line with what we need to do.
And I would just respond, I believe we're going to be asked to approve the budget in 2 weeks.
Well, I mean, we're not gonna, we're nowhere near presenting a budget right now.
I know,
Yeah,
I just know it's
again,
per the timeline,
let's-
isn't that right?
Yeah, we have a public hearing in 2 weeks, I believe, and we will approve our budget. And, putting the cart before the horse, I don't see this committee putting forward a budget that is below what we would expect above net school spending.
Yeah, fair.
But we're not there yet, and again, my apologies, I let this get off rails a little bit, after I said I wouldn't. So let's get on with the presentation and to discuss a little bit. I think that's an important kind of point to have in mind of where we are as opposed to the net school spending number, which is what's been different from the past.
Right, and a big part of our efforts in 2 weeks are tied to the city's intent to bring a budget to council May 2nd.
Yep.
And there's a high probability that all happens before the state's final reconciled budget gets agreed upon. So a lot of things are going to change, over the next month and a half that are sort of beyond our capacity to influence.
So I'm going to make a suggestion right now, as chair, that we let Mr. Furtado and Mr. Sawyer, and I'll be the first one not to interrupt them, let them finish. And save our questions to the end, and then we'll be able to discuss this, because I think, this comes as not necessarily a shock tonight, but a shock as in prior years, so.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so it is different than
Yeah.
prior years. I don't think that was an intent, but it's a function of looking, where dollars normally exist and not seeing any, and not quite sure a month into a term that, things are as they appear to be. So, again, it's a very challenging situation on the city side. and very late process on the state side. So again, we have a lot of process to go through. But again, the good news is, you know, a 6.7% increase right now, as we sit here, which will only get better as the state process evolves and develops. I think that's sort of the bottom line for everything. You know, as the superintendent pointed out, and as the assistant superintendent is about to explain, we have a series of you know, funding goals and hopes and processes and staff to implement. Under a $97.5 million budget, that's going to be a challenge. That's being driven by a bunch of things. You know, again, our health insurance increase for this year is, again, a projection at 3.5%, which is, you know, $150,000 per point. So that's $500,000 right there. Transportation has been an extraordinary challenge, as this committee knows, the entire year, and is going to require funding from the stabilization fund. So our transportation budget is up substantially for '24. Our special education tuitions, which are quasi-controlled by the state of Massachusetts, are up 14% for private schools and 11% for collaboratives, which, you know, is beyond anything vaguely reasonable. And that's driven by them being particularly challenged by the employment environment, not being able to get enough staff to do their work without substantial salary increases. And in addition to all of that, you know, as this committee also knows, we're in a contract year, and those agreements are going to come in with, you know, numbers that are going to be consistent with where the budget is, but not leave a lot of room for us to be adding things.
I think you're good.
What's that?
There's just one bullet there. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that one.
Yes. So in addition to special needs, tuitions being what they are, we ran into the same problem. We had approximately 26 paraprofessional positions and support positions that we were not able to fill, not able to hire for, and had to unexpectedly go out and get contracted services for these positions because we don't have the option of not providing the services to our students. And that increased our budget by about $1 million in and of itself.
Okay, as Superintendent Sawyer mentioned earlier, we shared with you our budget priorities earlier, in December, and just wanted to make sure that we revisited those before the end of our presentation tonight. But we've had our district learning priorities in the district for quite some time now, and they are what continue to guide our decision-making, making sure that what we're focusing our efforts on and prioritizing our funds towards are providing engaging learning experiences for our students, finding new ways to infuse technology into our learning environments, personalizing our learning programs, providing experiential learning opportunities for them, and as always, finding a way to maintain our efforts focusing on Portrait of a Graduate. And I think many of the presentations that you've seen this year from the Spotlight presentations, students spoke quite significantly about that. So we have 5 main budget goals that we just want to make sure that we continue to bring to light tonight. One is that our teachers every single day are continuing to scaffold new learning for students and focusing on grade level content, and this is just one of the many things that they do every day. They're also trying to support students with their social emotional concerns, behavioral concerns, and also at the same time And you've heard us mention this before, our teachers provide high-quality learning experiences with less than average resources. And they do this every single day and try to find new ways, innovative ways to support our students. With that and knowing that these innovative ways, we are continuing to find ways to enroll students in college courses so that they can receive college credit while they're here with us at Attleboro High School. We will continue to apply for the early college designation, so that's definitely part of this process. Also providing appropriate staffing and for class sizes and to support our staffing for our social emotional resources. Looking at our inclusive practices specifically for our most at-risk students, including those students with special needs, our English learners, and making sure that now that we are here in the new building, being able to maintain the operating costs that are associated with this building. And I think the final goal that we have is, and Mr. Furtado has spoken about this before, absorbing some of the costs associated that ESSER is currently funding and being able to maintain those through our local budget. And that includes the paraprofessionals that were hired for K-2 students. Our Family and Community Engagement Director has been working tirelessly trying to provide resources within the community and partnerships so that we have someone to reach out to for students that need supports outside of the school day. The Welcome Center has significantly increased our communication with families through the way that we communicate our community flyers, the way that we share district-wide information through our new website. Also trying to maintain and enhance the social emotional supports that we have across the district, as well as the staffing and platform for Attleboro Virtual Academy. So when you distill all of those goals down into priorities, what does that look like? So obviously staffing for our support personnel, looking at our middle school ACA programming, our middle school music program, which you heard our student representatives speaking about this evening, trying to rebuild that program, and as well as providing supports for early college. And then, once again, absorbing the costs of the new high school. So what does this all mean? The two main takeaways, which haven't changed, are to always our priority is always staffing for our students, making sure that we have the right staffing available for them in terms of class sizes, in terms of support personnel, in terms of providing interventions, and looking at ways to absorb the costs of ESSER so that we can maintain those current additional supports that we have through the local budget. The next steps are for, as you heard Mr. Furtado say earlier, the House budget will be released on Wednesday, then they will reconcile the budget. There will be the release of the final state budget, our public hearing, which is scheduled for the 24th, school committee approval, and then the expected date for the mayor's submission to municipal council on May 2nd. So, I'm sure you have questions.
So for the public hearing, we have to have a number. And when do we have to have the number? I mean, we need to give you a number tonight, right, to put for the public hearing notice in the paper?
Yeah. So yes.
Okay. And the number that was presented tonight was essentially the net school spending number?
Well, yes, turn out to be a net school spending number.
Okay. So I guess my first question, and I'm gonna start it with the caveat that I understand we have a new administration, and the new administration is walking into a situation and finding out what has happened before they got there. They didn't necessarily create the situation they find themselves in. But, I mean, is there any indication of how we find ourselves in a situation now where the city, you know, for the first time in years is saying that they can't fund us at what has been a promise to the schools, and was a promise, you know, was a promise by the past mayor, was a promise by all the candidates, and understandably before they saw what was going on in City Hall. But what happened to make this change where we will be receiving approximately $2.5 million less than we were led to believe we would receive? And if the answer is they don't know yet, then that's, you know.
No, I think they have a suspicion. You know, again, it takes an awful lot of work to kind of match through everything and have numbers tie out. That's a substantial amount of work. So I would say that in the last, in my time here, the city has never fully expended free cash. There was always funds for whatever commitments they had, which included commitments to the school, but other things as well. And right now, I think that the current administration is having trouble locating money of that nature. ARPA funds, free cash monies, all certified back in November. So that's provided them with a reason to be a little conservative in what they're doing until they kind of find some firm ground to walk on. Because right now there isn't a lot, and you know, it's certainly a question as to whether or not they find that. You know, and if not, then it is what it is. Again, if they were forced to take a position right now, I think they would say that the 24 budget is in deficit.
Okay, so, and I promise after my comment, I'll open it up to everyone else. So, having worked through the meals tax increase, having worked through 2016 where we got the commitment from the city to, you know, put half the levy towards an increase over net school spending, and having pushed really hard to have the city make a change in how they look at funding the school department as 55% approximately of the budget, and as a major, probably the major force in how people coming in and deciding whether or not they want to live in Attleboro now, as we're no longer the industrial community we were. You know, our community rises and falls with the schools largely, and I think we've worked very hard to get that change in mindset at City Hall and in the public, and as a result, I don't think we've made as much progress as any of us would have liked, but we've gotten significant progress over net school spending, and I don't see any way. I certainly can't support putting forth a budget that is less than what the commitment and the expectation had been, which would be the number that you gave us tonight, plus what we would expect to have received over net school spending. And I want to be clear, this isn't a disparagement of the new mayor or the new administration, because they're just coming in and trying to find out what's going on and what happened before them. There's expectations for the school department, there are needs for the school departments, and these are needs that benefit the city as a whole. And I just cannot see supporting any budget proposal that's less than that. And that's, I'll get off my soapbox and let everyone else talk. Mr. Geddes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know that my soapbox will be very different. I know that it was a red flag for me as the previous, I guess, full-time administration was departing, when some of the promises that were made for capital improvements were not able to be met. I didn't realize that those red flags needed to be waived for operational funds as well. I do know that education is a priority for the new mayor, and it has been for a long time. And so to Mr. Frappier's point a little while ago, I think it does make sense to give an opportunity in the coming weeks, although it's a tight turnaround to kind of find a way to make this right, especially with how much the state has done, because 2016 was a perfect storm of issues at the state level and issues at the local level. And the city was able to step up a little bit more back then, not as much as would have been needed, but as much as they could. And then the state since then has worked very hard to improve things for us as well. But there's still obviously a large gap. And we have spent the last 7 years recovering from what 2016 did to us as a district. And we learned lessons. I know the administration learned lessons from that year as well, and have made changes, I guess, in-house, so to speak, to limit issues like this from popping up. So I guess, is it safe to say, all of this leading into a question, is it safe to say that continued recovery in staffing from 2016, is that essentially paused as we head into next year, and that we're not going to be able to add additional staff? And is there any concern, because we are in the midst, the entire city, I believe, is in the midst of union negotiations, is there any concern related to not being able to meet any commitments that have been made to any employees in the district?
Yep. Great questions. Excuse me. So we, as a district, we would not propose a budget that wouldn't meet our basic level service needs. We feel strongly that any contractual agreement we arrive at will be able to be funded. Things like the contractual obligations we have for the tuitions and contractual obligations we will have for transportation will be funded. The health insurance will be funded. The concern for the district would be, as the assistant superintendent pointed out, new programming that our students need in terms of supports won't be available to the degree we certainly would want them at. As the superintendent pointed out, the $10 million in stuff we're missing won't be addressed at all. But any obligation we enter into, we will certainly fund. So from the committee's perspective, the 97.5 is certainly not what we want, certainly not where we want to be, but will not result in us not being able to meet our obligations.
And short a budget and personnel director on the city side, I'm guessing the answer to this question is no, but it's worth a shot. Has there been any consideration for planning for any type of early retirement incentive plans if there is going to be a personnel concern, either for the schools or the city, or is that not something that has been considered yet that you know of?
Certainly haven't had that discussion. I don't know. I'd be kind of surprised if they were thinking that way. Again, just from a timing perspective.
I mean, the last time we had a discussion with the previous administration, there's no appetite for it because the demographics of the city's employees don't make it.
Aren't close to it.
Yeah, that doesn't make it worthwhile. And I don't think those have changed. So while there has been zero conversations about that with the new administration, I have no reason to believe that the position would be any different.
Thank you.
Mrs. Storrs?
2 points, if I may, Mr. Sheriff. You had brought up like the free cash, because I thought Attleboro was in a really good place right now. I thought there was like upwards of $10 million in free cash, and then effectively city-side ESSER equivalent type funds that have been, that were still available. Could you speak to that?
I don't know specifically what happened at the end of 2022. I do know, I want to say a communication package was given to the municipal council with north of 40 items on it that had to do with projects and expenditures from those sources of funds. So when we provided the city with a list of projects, security cameras, walkie-talkies, et cetera, that have been discussed in finance that the superintendent, myself, the mayor, the budget director had all sat down and kind of chatted about. And that was in the middle of December, and by the middle of January, we were told that
funding for those discussions didn't exist, and then by, the next month, kind of end of February, it was clear that they had some concerns. So my understanding, again, we don't exchange kind of information regarding each other's budgets necessarily unless there's a problem, but my understanding is the free cash has been committed to already in that communication to the municipal council, and that the ARPA funds, their ESSER equivalent, the municipal ESSER equivalent, are also fully expended.
And that was like 15, 16,
17.
17 million
Yeah.
over the last like 2 years.
Yeah.
So we went through 17 million in the ESSER and 9 or 10 million in free cash gone, from what you understand.
From what I understand.
All right, thank you. And I do want to point out, I'm not putting a blame on somebody who's been in office for 1 month at all, obviously. I'm sure it's a very difficult time and a very difficult situation. Just, all this time, since the start of our process in December, we've been going under one belief, and all of a sudden, here we are today, 2 weeks away from when we should be voting to put forward a budget number. We're being told we're effectively $2 to $2.5 million below where we kind of should be based on the way things have always been. And that's not even including the fact that the current mayor did promise $250,000 on top of that during the election. I don't think anybody would deny that. I'm pretty sure I've heard that during the debate. So the point is, if you add that in, we're talking 2.25 to 2.75 below what we were expecting a couple weeks ago. Fair statement? Thank you.
Mr. Domenici?
Thank you. I do have some comments, but I had a couple of questions first, hopefully to get a little clarification. In the presentation, it says full SOA implementation, right? But my understanding, so is that like the catch-up from the first couple of years? Because we still have another 3 years, I think, of the Student Opportunity Act. So there's going to continue to be increased state funding potentially that comes our way over the next several years.
I'm under the impression they fully funded it in this budget cycle.
Which is largely why the state increase is what it is this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're saying the 6 years worth of funding all just happened this year?
No, it's been, we got SOA money last year, and I believe SOA money the year before, but they,
This is the third year.
But that was marginal,
This year, last
like those were marginal amounts, I mean,
Yes.
based on what the formula was looking like. We didn't,
Exactly.
Attleboro we fell in that gap of getting virtually nothing. But are we
yeah,
now
but
saying
especially the
that,
first year, yeah.
but it was supposed to be phased out first off over a 7-year period, and then they condensed it to 6 because the first year they barely did anything for most schools.
But we
But we're not fully through those years yet, so we're saying that's all done now. That's what we're saying.
Well, again, that first year was flummoxed by the state's use of pandemic enrollment levels.
I agree.
Which-
I agree.
So that's why
with
it
plumbing.
didn't feel like
Yeah.
it was much of an impact, because we were 200 students short of our actual enrollment.
No, I get that, and I was looking at the numbers that kind of reflect it across 21 and 22. Our number basically was flat from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22, and we've got the bump. We got a bit of a bump last year. Our net school spending was only 1.9 above, so it was a little less than what the previous mayor had promised to commit to us, but I think the trade-off was that we were gonna get some additional capital improvement projects funded, which we're not. But I just, that question, that kind of struck me there. My other is, we mentioned level services, and normally in any budget cycle, net school spending does not equal level services. Are we saying that this number here would actually at least give us level services? Where we can fully fund the staff that we have, we may not add to it, but we can fully fund what we have and fully offer, does it actually equal this time around?
We will, again, every year, there are just a whole series of puts and takes. We buy better for electricity, we lose stuff here, we do. We're fairly confident that, as we exist today, we could address and meet all of the contractual obligations and needs, including labor contract discussions. The gas commodity is going to expire in April of '24, you know, that's going to be a concern. That's going to be a double-digit increase. The transportation concerns, the tuition concerns, we feel confident, more confident than usual that we'll be able to address all that.
Okay, I mean, to get to the point, we're not looking at a 2016 scenario.
No.
So
In
there's,
2016, we had no increase.
we didn't have an
state
increase in the state funding
budget.
formula.
And we have
So-
$5.5 million. from
Yeah,
the
so we're
state.
getting some help that we all said we needed back then. That's the difference between what we're seeing here and what we all endured, which none of us want to go back to
Right.
from 7 years ago. And then I had a question about the ESSER funds, right? Because our expectation is that with the commitment of, you know, the previous mayor he always stated 2.25 above. The current mayor promised more than that, you know, at the high school debate. I understand that it's one thing to promise something when you're running for an office, it's another when you see the reality when you step in. But the point is, we probably had some goals to get some funding off of the ESSER funds and into our reoccurring budget that we're not going to be able to do with this number. And we have like 1 year, I think, left of ESSER funds. So we've got a number out there, like, so in the presentation, it listed absorb necessary supports currently funded by ESSER, and underneath, the sub-bullets here are K to 2 paraprofessionals, family and community engagement, social and emotional supports, and AVA. This is outside of the spending, and maybe we had to use some ESSER funds for this, because we don't have the staff in some instances, right?
Those are exclusively funded by ESSER.
All of that's exclusively funded by ESSER. We have another year to figure out how to get this on our budget, or else we lose it. So as concerning as this number is now, I'm looking at fiscal year '25 saying, we're in some trouble. And I'm sorry, but like there was, you know, the city is flush with cash, not a problem. Like, I understand, this isn't you, Mark. You do genius work balancing our budget, but this body had been accused of not managing our funding well, to the point where the previous administration wanted to come in and be the chair of the school committee. I don't think that's the case here, but I'm really frustrated by this, because I wish we had the administration here to kind of explain where this is. There's only so much that you can do, or Dave or Lori. You know, this is rough, and I mean, I'm concerned about other funding in the city as well. I mean, we're here from a school perspective, and we take the largest share of the budget. I'm certainly concerned about other sides of the city, other departments, but this is kind of alarming news. And while I'm thankful that we can, you know, not have a repeat of 2016, this is a stopgap, that if we didn't have ESSER funds, we'd be in some real trouble right now. And the other concern I have is that we're going to have to put forth and vote on a budget, which, you know, to some degree is ceremonial, because we could say we want, you know, $300 million. Ultimately, it turns out to whatever, you know, the mayor sets the budget, and then the council approves it. So no matter what we vote on here, it's largely ceremonial, because we don't ultimately have the control of our budget. We get the number, and then we just do what we can with it. You work your magic every year, right? I was on budget subcommittee for a lot of years. We land really close to the end of the runway every year, and that's to your credit. But, you know, I'm just really concerned about the beyond as well. Like, this is a 1 year stopgap for us, and, you know, we got to look ahead. So I'm really, really concerned with this. So, and not only that, my last little point is, like, we ultimately, even the mayor's going to submit a proposal to the council before everything is fully finalized at the state. So I don't know, we have very little wiggle room to make any adjustments on that. Once the number has been in, maybe, you know, maybe at that it becomes more legislative, where the council has to, you know, if we get extra funding, the mayor has to bring it down, the council has to send it over. But we're rolling the dice hoping that we have this stuff. So,
Well, I think
it's concerning.
yeah, the net school spending mechanism, it's not illegal to go below net school spending. It becomes a problem for a municipality if they cumulatively reach 5% below net school spending.
Yeah, my
Then
understanding
they're
was
in trouble.
if you went under in one given year, you had to correct it within the next fiscal year or two in order to not get penalized.
At 5% below net school spending cumulatively, you will get hit with penalties against local aid.
Yeah.
So no municipality has an interest to be that far below net school spending. So certainly that's not anything we discussed with the city in our meeting regarding the budget. I mean, they have a profound dedication and interest in making sure that doesn't happen. But again, if you don't know where the money is, it's kind of hard to.
I guess I'll just, and I apologize, I've monopolized time, so I'll be really brief. The last, well, actually, I don't think we have it in here. I guess my question would be, how much exposure do we have on ESSER? What amount of ESSER funds is currently, supplementing our budget right now?
Sure. It's something between $1 million, depending on what we're doing and how we're doing it, $1.5 million to $2 million a year.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions right now.
Mr. Larson?
So just a few things. I'm not even sure I have a question in all of this, but part of all of this is an annual event. We create a budget, as Mr. Domenici just said. We can create a budget with really whatever number we want. We submit it to the City Hall. Mayor sends it down to City Council. City Council can only reduce it. They can't add to it, and those are facts. This all happens before the state has all of their work done, so there's always an appropriation at some point, plus or minus, over the course of the summer, so that the city's budget resembles what the state budget says it's going to resemble. All of this has happened every year that I've been on the committee, so that part doesn't concern me. Lost my train of thought. So my concern is more that, I mean, like I said, we all received a copy of the annual report, and unless you really can't sleep, it's only so much fun reading. But the city did receive just over $1 million in the meals tax. It's right in there. There was special notation, which I thought was interesting in the auditor's report to read, that not long after the city's $9 million worth of free cash was certified, from the middle of November to early to mid-January, they managed to spend $9 million. And every one of those appropriations is called out in the annual report by the auditor as a specific, kind of a unique transaction in a short period of time. And, there were a lot of different things in there, a lot of very important things to the city. Part of it was funding the current year that we're in. I mean, the last couple of years, there has not been enough money in the city to properly fund the school department with that current year's operation taxes. So for the last couple of years, or maybe even more, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the end of our funding has always been, once free cash has gotten certified, they've backfilled the part that they needed to, in order to fulfill the obligations of our budget. So to have gone through $9 billion, part of that was funding back the current year that we're in, but then not saving anything so that we didn't have to do that again was concerning to me as I was reading the report. So there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of different people. There's a lot of things that are going to happen in the next 2 weeks and in the next 4 weeks. So I'm going to withhold the rest of my comments until then. But I would certainly suggest that people spend the time. I know it's over 100 pages of wonderful reading, but spend some time, go in there, and see what happened. Thank you.
Mr. Torres?
Thank you, Chair. So, hearing the discussions, one of the things I think I came to the realization, if you take the, let's say, 2.5 million below where we should be based on history, give or take, and you take how much we're spending in ESSER funds right now to maintain our staffing and all the programs and everything, it's effectively equivalent, close enough, to the formula increase. So effectively, we thought that the formula increase was going to get us closer to where we really should be, like close that gap that we talk about year after year after year. Really, all it's really doing is it's putting us right back to where we've always been. And that's terrible, because again, since December, we've been operating on the idea that, hey, we've been 10 million or more below where we really should be because of the state formulas and all this other stuff. They fix it, and now we're effectively being told, we're 2.5 short from the city based on history, and the ESSER funding, you add those up and there goes the additional funds, give or take. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, back to 2016, because I used to think about 2016 a lot. I mean, we still recover from it. A lot of us have scars from it. That proves, that was the year that proved why it's so dangerous to just be so reliant on the state to come through and be the white knight to save us year after year, right? Because some years they're not going to be able to. And in a year when they're not able to, if the city's not able to fund us at a level above the minimum, we're in crisis mode, because we're always teetering on that brink. We've been exceedingly lucky the past 4 or 5 years that the state has stepped up in a way that they hadn't the few years before that. And as a result, we haven't found ourselves in crises. I think there's been some frustration that on the municipal side, we haven't been able to increase the municipal support that we had received before above net school spending, but because the state was stepping up, we're able to tread water and continue to provide beneficial quality educations to our students. That's going to happen this year. If the city can't come up with the money to fund as we were expected, the state has stepped up and we'll survive and provide good quality educations for our students. But as Mr. Domenici said, what does that do to us for next year? And what does that do? That puts us right back to where we were in 2015, right on the brink for the next time the state can't fund us at that level. And then I suspect that the mayor is committed to funding education, and next year if there's additional funds that she can fund us, that she'll work back towards it. But if you're not starting from 2.5 million above, you're starting from zero, we have to work back to something that took us years and years to climb. And there's either got to be a way to find the money to fund us at the level we expect it to be and need to be funded at, or there needs to be a real investigation and query as to how did this happen? How did the last municipal government allow a situation to arise where we can find ourselves in March in a situation where a new administration walks in and says, whoops, sorry, you don't have the money to fund the schools at the level I had always promised. And if that's the reality, then there needs to be a real it needs to be looked into, because it's not acceptable, because we're going back to 2014, 2015, which is right, praying that the state comes through on an annual basis, and that's not a place that's comfortable for anyone to be at.
I would agree. I would also echo what Mr. Larson said in terms of there was sort of historically, robbing from Peter to pay Paul across the certification of free cash. That practice, married with the expiration of ARPA and ESSER, would have us in a pretty bad spot. And I think that the city, the current city government has an awareness of that and is very concerned about 25, as we are.
So, and I'm not surprised to hear they have that, awareness, knowing the new administration and the thoroughness that they'd be looking into it at. So that's, not surprising, but it's comforting to hear. I guess we need to have a number for the publication, for the public meeting, for the budget that we're going to propose to the city. The number that was proposed today was essentially net school spending, and so that's not something I'm prepared to enter. That's not something I'm prepared to support putting forward. We have had a historic commitment that was 2.25 above net school spending. Was that the? I'm not talking about the current mayor's. I don't care about the campaign promises for the purposes of this discussion. I'm talking about what in the past we've received, has been expected and received.
I think that was the high water mark.
Yeah.
2.25.
It's varied year to year.
It varied, but 2.25 is we've received from prior administration, so
2.25 is like the average,
Yeah.
because we've hit 2.5 in the last few years.
not above.
No,
Not-
no, but I mean, 2.25 I think is a good average.
So what I would, I guess what I would entertain as a motion is that the administration put forth for the public notice for the proposed budget, the net school spending number plus $2.25 million. This is based on historical support from the municipality.
One point on that, if I can.
Well, let's just.
Before that
Okay.
motion goes
Yeah.
out, before it goes out, because my understanding is 97.5 is actually above the 97.1 that would be, is that right? 97.1 would be the number we'd be working from?
No, again, because of the way the credits work,
I just wanted to verify.
97.5 is, again, there were too many assumptions in the number to say it's this exactly, but it's definitely somewhere between 0 and 0.5% above net school spending.
So what the motion that I would be asking for is the net school spending number plus 2.25. Anyone wants to make the motion, they can.
So, before you do.
Yeah, sorry.
Just, there's a timing issue in terms of the ad and the hearing.
Okay,
I'm not sure if that went out already. If it has gone out,
yeah.
that would be a motion that the committee would make at the hearing. So
Has
you're not,
has the ad gone out?
I don't know, Patty would know that.
I believe it is
So-
2 weeks prior to,
Right.
so most likely
Uh,
it's going to.
Thursday, I thought,
Yeah.
but
Last Thursday it went out?
I believe, I need to check that.
All right, so,
But that wouldn't have, excuse me, that wouldn't have had a budget number associated with it. That would have
Yeah,
just
no,
been-
it's a, yes, by school and then a total for the administration, so.
all right, so,
It has to be publicly advertised for the hearing.
all right, so in the event it has not gone out, I want the motion to be made tonight. That if it hasn't gone out, this is what the motion is going to say. If it has gone out, I'm sure the administration will let me know. We will make the motion before the public hearing.
Yes,
Okay?
yeah.
All right? So I'll entertain a motion again that the budget proposal set forth in the publication that hasn't gone out will be the net school spending number plus $2.25 million.
So moved.
Second.
And again, just, the 2.25 is a number that's a historical number. It's not, I'm not taking any campaign promises by any of the candidates into account here. This is strictly what we've received in the past. I think what we had hoped to receive based on whoever won the election, or if the last mayor hadn't left, what we would receive. So that's where that number comes from, just to be clear for everyone. Mr. Geddes.
Thank you. Because Mr. Domenici mentioned that there was a change in the note about slightly below versus slightly above. So I just want to make sure that the number that we received in the presentation is matched. It was, we had $97,517,044.
Yep.
That's the same that we saw today.
That's-
Okay.
yep,
Just
that's
wanted to,
cool.
couldn't remember all the slides and numbers.
And you guys can clean up all the final numbers and just, you understand what the motion.
Absolutely.
Assuming it passes, okay. And if, you'll let me know if it doesn't, and if it's already gone out, we'll make the motion on the public hearing. Any further discussion or questions from anyone? Mr. Domenici?
Yeah, just a quick note, because I pulled them down. I have fiscal year 21, 22, and 23's budgets before me. So in fiscal year 21, it was in fact 2.25 million above. In fiscal year 22, it was 2.5 million above, and in fiscal 23, it was 1.956. So when you average it out, it's about 2.25. My question is this, though. This is about putting out for the public hearing. So even if we put the public hearing at the number that we were given today, all it is a public hearing that says I am for or I am against, and then ultimately we still have to vote on something, right? So
Yeah.
no matter what the number
Exactly.
is, you're either for or against. So we,
Yeah, this is largely, I would say, we're not voting on the budget, right? We're making a point to the administration that we expect them at, when we vote on a budget in 2 weeks, I think we're saying, we expect it to be, my idea behind the motion is, we expect you, when you come to us in 2 weeks, to have a budget presented and to be able to defend and present that's 2.25 above the number. Understanding that we can vote lower, we can vote higher. People can come and say, you know, it should be higher, it should be lower. It's just, I think, more to pass the message on to the administration. This is where we are as a committee at this point.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep, Mr. Frappier.
As just a point of clarity, I've heard us talking points and million. I know the budget's almost 100 million.
Yep.
What are we going with? Is it 2.25 million or 2.25%?
2.5 million.
Million.
2.5.
So 2.5 million, thank you.
Yep, 2.25 million. Yep. Yep. Mr. Geddes.
Thank you. And as part of the budget that we receive in advance of our vote in 2 weeks, would it be possible to identify what gets lost in that delta between the 2.25 and the net school
Yes, I
spending
did
number?
provide that tonight because, again, there were a whole bunch of assumptions in there.
Right.
And it's very likely to change, as it did over the weekend, yet again.
Absolutely.
And come up with a different outcome.
Just because I think that will be helpful for us to determine what makes sense.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Mr. Domenici.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
Roll
Mr.
Did
Frappier.
we second?
We seconded, it was, yeah, sorry. We seconded, then we had discussion, yeah. Yeah.
All right, so just quickly to clarify, the yes vote means I'm in favor of your proposal, assuming we have the time to actually advertise it that way. Otherwise, it's just going to be what it is.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, then my vote is yes.
All right, Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Frappier?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the administration. I know, you know, I appreciate the work you've done with the new city administration. I appreciate the work the city administration has done sitting down with you guys to try and get a handle on this. I know it's been a shock, you know, a bit of a shock to everyone, so I'm sure you guys will continue to work together to make it work. Thank you. Mr. Sawyer?
That concludes my report.
You sure?
All right. Next, we have minutes from our March 27th, 2023 meeting. The minutes were circulated with your materials. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, corrections, or edits? All in favor?
Aye.
5 items on the consent agenda tonight. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $5,000 from Feinstein Foundation to Thatcher Elementary School. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $150 from Edward M. Doherty and Catherine Doherty to the swim team. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $100 from Diane Lynch Bartek to the swim team. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $352 from the Attleboro Varsity Booster Club to the swim team. And motion to approve an overnight international field trip for 14 grade 10, 11, and 12 students to attend the Skills USA State Competition in Marlboro on April 27th to April 29th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Subcommittee reports, just one tonight. Mr. Larson, Finance and Budget.
Thank you. Finance and Budget Subcommittee met on April 5th. We went through the monthly budget reports with Mr. Furtado, with the exception, as we've previously spoken about, special ed, both tuition and transportation costs being a lot higher than we had originally intended, and we're going to get some relief from that from the fund as a good solution there. The rest of the budget appears at this point that we're going to have the pluses and minuses kind of work out so that we'll have a good ending, but that's still to be determined as everything gets shaken out over the next couple of months. We had a brief MSBA update. The train project is all going well throughout all the different schools, and it's actually a little ahead of schedule. They're continuing to work on a punch list here at the high school, and the Willett Roof project is out to bid. So the designer was picked the other week after our meeting was over, so that was kind of convenient, with the hope that the roof project will be done over the summer. And the people that were interviewed seemed to think that that was a real possibility and didn't see a big issue there, so that's very exciting. We had one motion to bring forward, and again, it's still a prior year invoice, and we will be changing the date of our next meeting from May 3rd to May 10th. Mr. Storrs, did you have a
I did
question?
not.
Okay. So the one motion that we have to bring forward is, again, for a prior year obligation. So I would request approval of spending, approve a motion for $1,414.50. I did not bring the rest of it, but, oh no, yes it is. It's from Eversource. I don't know why they have one school that they don't like to bill on time, and this is the one. And this will be paid through the school department funds. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. That's Mike's.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. That concludes subcommittee reports today. Next, we have open forum. Is there anyone who'd like to address the open committee at open forum tonight? All right, I will close open forum. New business, any new business? All right, no new business. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.